Now, when he was still campaigning, Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, threatened to cut ties with Beijing, favouring trade with the US and Europe. But after 23 years of negotiations, a European free trade deal still seems to be a long way off. That leaves none other than China as an increasingly important trading partner for Argentina, something that is softening the hardline anti-Beijing stance of the country's new president.
Martin Sturla breeds cows for sale to cattle farms at his home 100 kilometers from Buenos Aires. He also sends cattle embryos to Spain and Portugal. He'd hoped the Mercosur-EU trade pact would help him ramp up exports, but former President Alberto Fernandez put the brakes on it, supposedly to protect the beef industry. However, his successor, Javier Milei, supports the deal.
Europe has hit its livestock ceiling and cannot supply anymore. And we were historically the main producers and exporters of beef to Europe and to the United States.
But the main export destination for Argentine beef is China. Javier Milei had branded China and Brazil communist, threatening to freeze diplomatic relations. And yet, as president, he's already initiated talks with both nations.
That's usually the case, that as they get closer to power, they become more moderate in some expressions, and that has been reflected in foreign policy in recent months, from very black and white ideological positions to pragmatic visions.
While many foreign companies are wary of investing in Argentina in the face of an ongoing economic crisis, China is continuing to expand its involvement there. The country is of great importance for China's raw materials policy. Companies such as Ganfeng and Xijing Mining have secured access to lucrative lithium deposits in Argentina. When Argentina joined the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative in February 2022, both countries agreed on joint projects worth $24 billion. Trade between the two countries is also growing steadily. In 2022, China became Argentina's most important supplier for the first time, ahead of Brazil, with a strong upward trend in imports. With Javier Milei's contradictory statements on China, it's unclear which direction the new Argentine president will take.
Let's get more with DW China analyst Clifford Coonan. He joins me now in the studio. Clifford, can Argentina afford to turn its back on its seemingly most important trading partner?
Well, I think it's kind of difficult to work out exactly what's going on here because, as with many populist leaders, you've seen an anti-China stance, whereas the back channels have been much more conciliatory towards China. I don't think Argentina can afford to turn its back on China, but I think what this is more a question of is that Argentina is focusing more on the US. So a lot of the roles that China has taken until now, I think Argentina is hoping that the US will step in because he is very anti-communist. He made this very clear during the elections. He called China an assassin. In recent days, there's been reports on social media how he's telling people don't be communist, which may or may not be satirical. It's quite hard to work out sometimes with these social media of his. But I think basically it's as much a looking towards the US as it is turning away from China.
So don't be communist from the Argentinian leader, but also there's a reliance there. What's at stake for China? What about the other side?
Well, a lot of this has to do with China's Belt and Road project, which is a massive infrastructure investment program. And for China, it's positioning itself very much as a champion of the global South. And Argentina and many Latin American countries are also within this grouping. China is also a leader in the BRICS organization with Brazil, Russia, and India, and South Africa. And Milei has said that Argentina will no longer join that. So in many ways, it's pulling out of this traditional sphere of influence that China is trying to build up at the moment. So it has quite serious ramifications for Beijing.
And what then is the specific reaction to Milei and his moves then, after you look at the big picture for where Argentina fits in?
I always get the sense that Beijing can be quite easily wrong-footed by populist leaders because there's a certain lack of coherence about their policies. What Beijing is doing has been to initially it was angry. It got rid of a debt currency swap agreement, which is a way of using Chinese currency to do part of Argentina's business. But it now looks like there's back channels that are happening there that shows that a lot of this may be bluster on Milei's part, that like a lot of countries, he's just eager to play both sides, whichever country is going to help Argentina's interests. And I think one thing that we've seen from that is his primary concern, is that he wants to boost Argentina's role, happy to boost its position with the United States. But at the same time, I think he must know somewhere that he has to be careful not to completely alienate China.
So not meaning what he says. Welcome to politics, I guess. Thank you so much, DW's Clifford Conan.
In Argentina, trade unions and leftist parties are protesting against a raft of controversial reforms decreed by the new far-right populist president, Javier Milei. Thousands of people have rallied in Buenos Aires against the plans to deregulate the economy, calling on the courts to declare the plans unlawful. Milei's wide-ranging plans include loosening laws protecting workers and ditching rules preventing the privatization of state companies. Milei says he's pressing ahead anyway with measures he says are necessary to tackle economic decline and rampant inflation.
Shopping in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires. Merchants are eager for foreign currency, and the rate seems to change by the hour, within just days of an emergency decree deregulating the economy. New President Javier Milei campaigned on promises to free Argentina from decades of mismanagement. He's now delivering on those promises to reduce government intervention in the economy. Since we took office, we have been focused on trying to contain the enormous crisis we inherited. For this, we designed a shock stabilization plan that includes a fiscal adjustment program, adjusting the foreign exchange rate to market value, and a monetary policy that includes cleaning up the central bank. Inflation is running at over 160% for this year, and nearly half the country lives in poverty. But many people disagree with Milei's plans, including his telling people that things will get worse before they get better.
Less than 2 weeks into power, this government has already lied to the people. And not only lied, but is destroying an entire country. I'm here for the people who did not vote for him, and also for those who voted for him, believing that he was going to be beneficial for the country. On the contrary, this new president has given away the country.
Milei called a special session of the legislature starting this week. They must sign off on his decrees. If the Congress fails to take action, the reforms go into full effect at the end of the month.
Let's go straight to our correspondent, Alejandro Rebosio in Buenos Aires. During his campaign, Milei promised radical changes. One of them appears to be this decree to change or eliminate more than 300 rules regulating Argentina's economy and politics. Can you give us a sense of what these measures would do?
Well, if the Congress does not reject the decree, if the justice does not reject the decree, because there are some trials against the decree from people that say that this decree is against Argentina's constitution, well, this will be a huge revolution for Argentina's economy, from a closed economy to an open economy, from an economy with a big participation of the state to a free market economy almost without regulation. But people in November has voted Milei because of his promises of dollarization to eliminate the national currency, the peso, and his critics against the political caste, but not necessarily for these free market regulations.
And yet, it's been a little over 2 weeks since Milei took office, and we have already seen various protests against his reform plans. What specifically are people protesting?
Well, people are protesting because inflation is rising from 160% in November to more than 200% in December, and the wages are not rising so much. The new government has also frozen a social subsidy that received 1.2 million people in 2024 above the high inflation. They are protesting against the labor reform by decree that eliminates all kind of punishments against informal employment. They are protesting because the new government is also taking away the unions from the health sector and giving it to the private sector. And they are protesting also against the demonstration regulations that punish all kind of blockades and do not allow the people to do the demonstrations on the street, but only on the sidewalk.
Now, you've hinted at the fact that this decree is not a done deal. Congress, for example, could still yet sink Milei's plans, and they're going to be debating that plan decree this week. How likely do you think it is to go through?
Well, it's difficult because the Milei's party, the Freedom Advances, has only 38 of the 257 deputies and only 7 from 72 senators. So he needs to do alliances with provincial parties, with center-right parties. He can get some support from a Republican proposal, the party from former President Macri, but he needs also the center parties, the provincial parties, and also some part of the Peronist opposition. And this would be very difficult. That's why yesterday he said that if the Congress rejects the decree, he will organize a referendum. And also he says that some opposition leaders ask him for bribes, but this opposition leader has denied these kind of accusations.
Alejandro, thank you very much for your reporting. That is Alejandro Rebosio in Buenos Aires.